The next concept we're going to illustrate is 4 ways to generate a check. I'm going to go AP vendor list, and I'm going to select All City Tile as my vendor. I get a ledger here, $79.36. $79.36 is what I owe. I'm going to double click on the invoice, and this invoice has not been paid, and if I click this check button, it allows me just to cut a check for this invoice. One of the 4 different ways to generate a check. Instead of clicking print, I'll click OK, and it'll log the check. So there's my check, and this is my balance. My adjusted balance is $55.76. If I double click on the check, it'll bring the check up on the screen. Now, I want to illustrate how you reverse a transaction. Regardless of the type of transaction, you double click on it, pull it up on your screen, you click Utilities and Reverse Transaction. The reason we put the reverse transaction in the menu system is so that we could assign additional security. So now we're back to $79.36. The second way to generate a check is to do a manual AP payment. This is where I can pay one vendor and as many invoices as I want on that one vendor. So this is the second way to generate a check. I'm going to go ahead and select that same invoice, and I'm going to partial pay it just to illustrate the partial pay concept. So we've generated in one check, $23.60, $1,000. We have $13.60 left. $13.60 is what's left here. We have $69.36 left and owed to the vendor. So the next thing I'll do is I'll just pay the balance of that invoice. So we've cut 2 checks. Our balance is now $55.76. The third way to do a check is to do a check run. If I go to AP and pay AP invoices, I can select by vendor, by job. I'll do one job just to limit our selection. I can pay by invoice date or due date, include held checks. I'll say mark all. I can do my prepayment edit list, my check stub overflows here. I can also do my check stub overflows after the fact here. I can pay partial payments, and I can select to pay retention or unselect rows as well. I'm going to click print later just to illustrate how to send your items to the print queue, optionally. Okay, so I go to Utilities, Print Pending Transactions, and you'll see the checks that we just generated. So very rapid. The fourth way to generate a check is a hand check. GL, Manual Cash Disbursement. Okay, now the hand checks don't show up in the AP ledger because they didn't hit accounts payable, but you can still pull them up in the vendor notebook by clicking Cash Transactions. You'll notice that I debited expense and credited cash bypassing accounts payable. That's why they're not part of the vendor ledger. This print button down here will allow me to print a ledger, and then I can select the envelope icon, say PDF, email, click OK, and an email dialog will appear. Allows me to email out. Same ledger concept applies for accounts receivable. That was the 4 different ways to generate a check in the system.